Today I'm going to tear down the beloved Power Mac G4. This is the first model, the Sawtooth model. There was also one, I believe it was codenamed Yikes, which is fitting considering it looked identical yet was based on a G3 instead of a G4. So the bus speed was slower, and yeah, it wasn't a good memory speed. I think was 66 megahertz versus 100 megahertz SD RAM. So yeah, it was not a good buy for people. But this is the 400 megahertz model. I believe at the time there was a 450, and the 450 was quite hard to get. So this was my dad's, and this was our first computer since the 33 megahertz LC575 he originally bought. So it was quite the upgrade at the time. On the front, there is this little flip down thing for the DVD reader. No writing. I think it burned. Regular? No, it was just a reader. Single speaker, power button, and a reset button, and this little indented one is a programmer's switch. The case is metal with a plastic shell around it with handles that are actually very sturdy. You can easily lift the whole machine, even when it's loaded with hard drives. These were a pretty revolutionary case at the time, especially since you can open it up so easily. Let me just get this flipped around. At a time where you needed 50 screws to open up a PC, you could just do that. And on this model, with it flipped down, you can get access to memory, processor, not that there were many processor upgrades at the time, the PCI slots, AGP slot, all the drives. There's mounting brackets at the bottom for more drives. You can put a zip drive in here or another hard drive. I don't think there's any. Yeah, there's no drive in there. I took out all the drives of this thing a while ago. Looking at the back, you can see the arrangement of the ports. We've got two FireWire ports, which were amazing. I still love FireWire. Ethernet port, which is 100 base T. Two USB ports, audio in and out. An optional modem, which I believe I used for like a week. And a video card. This particular one is not the standard one. The standard one was an ATI Rage 128. This is a PCI one I just threw in there. Power in and out for, you can run an IEC connector to a monitor. And one of the interesting features of this case is because it's so easy to open in a school or something, obviously that's a problem because you can just reach in and steal the memory and whatnot. So what they did is they put this mechanism in here to lock the case. So if you pull this out, it locks the handle, and you can put a bolt through it, or one of the steel cables that links up to other hardware on your desk. So it was kind of a clever idea. Although I did see at what was it? It was at a university or something. I did see a computer lab with G4s where they had like a custom metal strap wrapped around it, so it was like completely sealed in. Instead of just using this, maybe they thought you could just break this off, but I don't think you can, because it's actually, I think the inside of it's metal. But yeah, they had like a big strap going across it, which was very funny to see. There we go, the original specs: 400 megahertz, 1 meg of cache, 64 megs of memory, a whole 10 gig of hard drive space, DVD reader, and a modem. Oh, and it came with a keyboard. Yay! The power supply is mounted up at the top, and it's a 237 watt max power supply, which is a little weird. And the DVD drive and zip drive, I think this module slides back and then out, and there's a shielded parallel ATA cable back here, which is kind of funny. You don't see too many shielded ones. I guess it's just because it's near the power supply. And we've got some Molex power connectors. This is the main fan in the unit, aside from the one in the power supply. The processor itself doesn't need a fan. and it's just mounted on this weird bracket, and it channels the air out the back. And on the bottom, it's kind of hard to see, but there's some spots for brackets for your hard drives. We'll look at this in a little more detail once I get it out, but the basic overview of the motherboard is 3 PCI slots, an AGP slot, 4 memory slots. I believe this is probably a 128 meg stick. Ooh, 256. I think this supported a maximum of 1 gig of memory using 4 256 meg sticks. And you've got the processor with its passive heatsink and its kind of custom design. And tucked away back here is an airport wireless card, which is a 802.11b, so very slow by today's standards. The modem is actually back here, even though part of it is up here. The I think like the isolation transformer and filtering is here, and it just runs a wire over to the actual modem itself. There's a missing chip here. I don't remember what this is for. There's also a programming header here, and unique to this Mac is an internal FireWire port. As far as I know, no Mac aside from this one had an internal FireWire port, and I have never ever seen a device that actually used an internal FireWire port, excluding like PC drive bays that you can put in a PC and it would have an internal wire to connect to a card. I've never seen a device that like an internal hard drive or anything that can use it. Someone did make what was essentially a flash stick, like your standard USB flash stick, but it was a FireWire one, and it was more cube shaped. And I think that you could probably put in here, but I've never actually seen one in person, and I don't know where I read that. It was probably in an old Mac User or Mac Addict magazine, and if I ever look through and find it, I'll try and track one down on eBay to get one, because they are quite unique, the little hard drive type thing. I think they actually used a micro drive, now that I think about it, one of the IBM micro drives. But so this was unused by everyone. I don't know of anything that could take advantage of it. There's a fuse there. Everything's fused, actually. There's tons of fuses. But I'm going to take out the whole board, and we'll just start looking at that. And I'll disassemble the case so I can get all the metal off to put it in the recycling. I don't think I can recycle the plastic, or at least not in New York, which has terrible recycling. Can't even recycle styrofoam here. It's insane. Anyway, so I'm going to start taking this apart, and we'll take a look at the individual parts. Just taking off all these screws, which, by the way, I had to use my damn drill to because they were so tough to take out. They're little hex driver screws, and they hold all of the handles and the side brackets on. Look at this. Look how much crap was behind this thing. Ugh. That is what many years of computer use gets you when there's no way to clean the filter. Obviously, it doesn't shoot out the air at the back. It just shoots it into the back of the case and just comes out somewhere. I mean, that's insane. I don't even know where to begin. Obviously, this is the antenna for the airport. It just runs up to this little module, which I'll take off. And yeah, if I had known there was dust building up back there, I would have cleaned that regularly. I've removed most of the plastic from the case, and I've also taken out the motherboard, and there's like hairs and dust and all sorts of crap in here. But we can see a couple things. One, this is the little transformer for the modem, and underneath there's actually a whole plastic support mechanism, and there's even a block of aluminum to connect to, or maybe it's steel. Might be steel. Although this block does look like it's aluminum, it might be attached on. Anyway, this actually hooks up to the motherboard controller chip, which is hidden when you're looking at the board from the top, but we'll go into that in a bit. The motherboard is actually held on with mostly posts instead of screws, which I actually prefer. You take out a couple screws and slide it forward and pop out. Really easy. Yeah, not too much going on down here. This is the better shot of the bays. There's 1, 2, 3 bays for hard drives. Each one can hold 2, I believe. There was an optional SCSI card which would let you hook up that many drives. This is the side which flips down to access the motherboard. There's actually a little controller, probably just like an amplifier, to send the wireless signal to both antennas. I didn't realize there were 2 in this thing. Very fancy, but it's just taped on in a few places, and there's a couple screws holding this on, and this runs in. Here's the internal connector which runs to the card itself, which we'll take apart as well. These things, this is the original Apple Airport card. These things briefly spiked in price. These things skyrocketed to like $100 a piece, which is like above retail. I think they were like $79 originally. So these things just skyrocketed because Apple discontinued them, and there were still a lot of people using these systems. But now they've dropped to the point where these things are literally worth like $4 because no one uses them anymore, and 802.11b is long dead. These are actually, I believe they're Orinoco cards. They're made by a third-party manufacturer, and Apple just changes them slightly. I think there's actually a mod to the interface here, but that may not even be true. You may be able to just pop in a regular Orinoco card. I can't remember. But yeah, they just have a little external connector for an antenna, and they're 128-bit encryption. So they were actually fairly good at the time, but we'll get into this in a bit. Going to take apart the power supply first because, well, it's probably filthy, and I can already see dust. Took out the screws. I don't know if it's all of them. Oh yeah. Dust. Boring metal top. Nothing too special there. Well, it's a fairly packed power supply for only a 200 and some odd watt model. Big, unique heat sinks. See how they come up on an angle? They're actually plain at the bottom. There's only fins at the top. Small fan. Looks like it's 80 millimeter. And yeah, some Rubicon caps. Pretty good quality. I obviously chopped off all the wiring because it was in the way. But yeah, it's made by Delta Electronics. So decent power supply. I never had any problems. You know, they even have protection right on the IEC connector. Yep. Can't complain about this thing except from the dust. The assembly for the optical drive and the optional zip drive, which you can put a hard drive in there. I had one in there when my case was very full of hard drives. Is just a metal chassis with parallel ATA hard drive, space for more connections for the zip drive, and yeah, nothing too special. And one thing I always do when I'm getting rid of optical drives is I just pop the emergency eject thing and check the drive, and it's got a copy of Diablo 2 in it. Yeah. The video card is just a Mac Edition Radeon GPU. Very basic. This is the original first generation Radeon. This particular one has the ATI Rage Theater on it, which gives you the composite, the S-Video out instead of composite. And yeah, it's just basic. I think it's 64 megs. This one is PCI. Like I said, the stock card is actually just a Rage 128, which is a 32 or maybe it's 16 meg card, and it's quite a bit slower than the Radeons. But this one I just had in because I was using the system temporarily. This is the Apple branded modem. I think it's made by Rockwell originally. Anyway, you've got the DSP and some memory, and the isolation transformer, and not much else. Has a small connector which runs over to this box, which gives you your country specific connector. And I thought there would be some stuff on this, and it looks like there's a little bit. Let's see how this thing comes off. Yeah, looks like it's just input protection. Nothing too interesting. I thought the transformer was on this. The oddly shaped board. I mean, how inefficient is that? I mean, how many little scraps are there when you're done with that thing? and it's Apple branded as well. This is the front panel board. It just has an LED, which is bicolor because it glows amber when it's asleep and green when it's on. 3 tactile switches, little 0.1-inch header that connects to this long cable that snakes through the case. One thing I noticed is that there's actually a reed switch on this. I don't know why. When this is in the case, this lines up with the closing door, like the side access panel. So I guess the computer can actually detect whether or not the case is open. But as far as I know, it doesn't actually care. I know this computer runs fine with the case open, and it never comes up with a warning saying it's open. G5s have a shroud inside them, which we will get to in a future installment, unless of course I end up editing that one first, in which case you'll have already seen it. But G5s have a plastic shroud that's used for the airflow, and it has to be installed. If it's not installed, it will not even power up the system. So I'm not sure what they were using this for. Maybe they determined that they just didn't need to. And my cat is meowing at the window. So I guess they just determined they didn't need this thing. Looking at the motherboard a bit more closely, we can see some power supply stuff over here, most likely for the main platform controller, which is under here. You can tell by all the bypass caps and resistors and stuff. There's a Lucent made Firewire controller, which is a little odd. I thought all the earlier ones were all Texas Instruments. There's an LED over here for power. You got your 4 PC100 SD RAM slots. There's a Broadcom based Ethernet controller. Like I said, it's only 100 base T. A later model was the Power Mac G4 Gigabit, which obviously added gigabit Ethernet. And we've also got a Crystal Sound audio controller, which is pretty standard for Apple. Another place where there's a little programming header to be soldered on. There was one back here, which we saw earlier. 64-bit PCI slots, which were pretty damn impressive for the time. Most systems only came with 32, and 64 was really limited to servers. And we've got your parallel ATA coming out. Spot for the battery, which I took out. I think this is a reset. No, this is a this resets the perimeter RAM. There's a connector here, moderately high density for the modem, and we've got the connector to the front panel. This, I believe, is a non-standard power connector. It looks like an earlier ATX, but I don't think it actually is. We've got the connector for your airport card, which is essentially a PCM CIA slot. There's another parallel ATA connector, which is for your optical drives, and the processor, which is on a daughter board. Now this comes with the heatsink on it. I just popped it off by let me see if I can get this on camera. I just jammed a screwdriver in to pop these off. I don't know if that's how you're actually supposed to take it off, but it worked well, and these are really sturdy. They're actually attached to the heatsink, so it came right off with that. And we'll just take that off for now. Get to that in a second. There's some metal supports to keep your CPU up. There's this very high density connector, very low profile as well. Fancy. Apple used these on several machines, mostly in the G4 and G5 series. Not the same connector probably, but you know, same style. And under here we've got a Lucent custom ASIC. We've got an Intel controller and another VSLI chip, another custom ASIC made by manufactured by VLSI, but for Apple. And not too much else on here. There's like a power regulator over here, some power circuitry, a couple fiducial marks, more power stuff, a Mitsubishi chip here, not sure what that's doing. And yeah, not too much else. It's essentially a modern motherboard. There's even more fuses under here. They do have fuses everywhere in this thing. Here's the processor board. This is the standard one for the 400 megahertz unit. Has a Motorola XPC 7400, aka G4, running at 400 megahertz. It has a little spacer foam block on it to make it a it's also got plastic on it too, to make it all nice and even for the heatsink, and external level 2 cache, because back in the day CPUs didn't have the space to just throw a whole bunch of cache on them, at least most CPUs. And the rest of it's just power stuff, really. Not too much interesting stuff on it. This is the little antenna splitter. As you can see, it's actually branded Apple like everything else in here. It's got 3 connections: common, main, and auxiliary, and they all go to, well, the 2 antenna ones go to antennas like this. The one that goes to the board looks like it's been burned at some point during manufacturing, and then just goes off to the little connector for the airport. This is the airport card. It has a little plastic pull tab, which is apparently attached to the label. And we'll just get into this the extreme way. Okay. I think we're making progress. The end is just plastic, and it's got like, there are seams all along here. There we go. There you go. So, on the inside we've got some, what looks like flash ROM, some shielded cans, anything on the back here. Oh wow, God, so much to do wireless back in the day. And I don't see any branding on it other than the chips. So it's possible Apple did have this manufactured just for them. I'll try and get these cans off with just some side cutters, because, well, I don't really care about this thing. With all the cans off, you can see the weird alien microwave technology that's in here. Yeah, standard RF stuff, although the complexity of this is way higher than that of a modern Wi-Fi card. Modern Wi-Fi card is essentially a chip smaller than this and a couple tracks going out to the antenna. Everything is internal to it now. They don't have any of these external cans usually. They do have one can where they just put the whole thing in usually now. But yeah, crazy the amount of integration we're at now. And yeah, overall that was an interesting teardown for me. I hadn't seen that far into the G4 before, and there's so much dust in that one. I hope it was worth it, because there's dust everywhere on my desk. It's going to take me forever to get it off. It was all over my computer, mouse, everything, because when I took that panel off, it just blew up. So I hope that was interesting. I have a mirrored drive door G4 and my G5 with the liquid cooling. Speaking of messes, oh man, that's going to be disastrous. But those should be coming up at some point. I was just about to pack this board up, and I noticed a few other odd things on this board. One, there's another test connector here, and there are sockets right here. Well, the PCB is designed for RF sockets. There's one here, and I found a couple more. Can't remember where all of them are. There's also a CD audio connector here that's not populated, but there's also another RF socket here, and I think there was one more for the FireWire. Can't remember where the other one was. I'm fairly certain I saw 3 of them. Anyway, yeah, these are obviously for testing, and they're not populated on this model, but it's strange that they would I guess they just didn't want to respin the board. Usually these sort of things are removed for testing, and I gave this some thought, and this is probably for an alternate Ethernet controller, or they were already planning for gigabit Ethernet at the time, but I think it was probably just for a different brand of Ethernet controller, because you can see it is actually linked in heading towards the Ethernet port. This is a footprint for a fairly standard RF connector, It's a coax connection. So I thought it was kind of interesting that they still left a lot of the testing elements in the board design.